I still remember the exact moment my world shattered. Not when he left me, that came later, but the precise second I discovered what he truly thought of me. 4 years together, and I'd never known I was just a placeholder until someone better came along. It was a Tuesday evening in late October. The kind where the air feels brittle, like autumn is holding its breath before winter crashes the party. I was at Marcus's apartment, the one we'd practically chosen together last year when his lease was up, the one where I'd helped pick out furniture, arrange bookshelves, and hang artwork that spoke to both of us, because we both knew I practically lived there anyway. He was in the shower when his phone buzzed on the coffee table. Once, twice, 3 times in quick succession. I wouldn't normally look. I've never been that person, but something felt different lately. The way he angled his screen away when texting. How he'd started taking calls in another room. The subtle shift in his affection that felt like watching someone slowly close a door. So I looked. The texts were from someone named Elise. The preview showed just enough. When are you going to tell her? It's been weeks and I'm tired of sneaking around. My fingers trembled as I picked up his phone. No password. We'd never kept those secrets from each other. Or so I thought. I shouldn't have scrolled up, but self-preservation has never been my strong suit. She's getting suspicious. Marcus had written earlier. Then end it, Elise replied. You said yourself she's not what you want long-term. It's complicated. Because you're making it complicated. You told me she was just a phase. The safe option until you figured yourself out. My stomach clenched as I kept scrolling through weeks of conversations. But it was one exchange from 3 weeks ago that burned itself into my memory forever. What about Claire? Won't she be devastated? Elise had asked. Claire believes in fairy tale endings. She's been planning our wedding since our 3rd date. It's exhausting. That doesn't answer my question. Look, she's unlovable. Not in the conventional sense. She's nice enough, but there's something missing. Something fundamental that makes it impossible to truly love her. I've tried for 4 years. I've tried. But you can't manufacture that feeling. I'm doing her a favor by ending this before she wastes more time. Unlovable. The word echoed in my head like a gunshot in an empty room. I sat there, phone clutched in my hand, as the bathroom door opened and steam billowed out. Hey, did you decide on dinner yet? Marcus asked, toweling his hair dry as he walked into the living room. He stopped when he saw his phone in my hand, his expression shifting from confusion to realization to that worst of all emotions. Pity. Claire. I looked up at him. This man I'd loved for 4 years. This stranger who thought I was fundamentally flawed. Unlovable? He didn't deny it. Didn't rush to explain it away. Just sighed like I'd discovered an unfortunate truth we'd both have to deal with now. You weren't supposed to find out like this. As opposed to how exactly? My voice was deadly calm, surprising even me. When were you planning to tell me I'm unlovable? Before or after you moved Elise into your future? You're taking that out of context, he said, but his eyes slid away from mine. I was just trying to explain to Elise why this is hard for me. By telling her there's something wrong with me? Something fundamental that makes me impossible to love? I stood up, surprised my legs could still support me. 4 years, Marcus. 4 years of my life, and you've been what? Tolerating me? Pitying me? That's not fair. I did love you in my way. In your way, I laughed, and it sounded like breaking glass. What way is that exactly? The way you love a pet? A charity case? He had the audacity to look wounded. You're twisting everything. Elise and it just happened. These feelings don't always make sense. Oh, they make perfect sense. I tossed his phone onto the couch. You found someone you think is lovable. Good for you. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, but he caught my arm. Claire, wait. Let's talk about this like adults. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. This face I'd memorized, had woken up to countless mornings, had kissed and loved and trusted. There's nothing to talk about. You can't argue someone into being lovable, Marcus. Apparently that's fundamental. I walked out, closed the door quietly behind me, and made it all the way to my car before the shaking started. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady myself enough to drive home, but the tremors wouldn't stop. Tears came next, hot and fast, blurring the dashboard lights into watery stars. Unlovable. The word kept pulsing in my mind like a neon sign. Was it true? Had everyone else seen it too? This invisible defect that Marcus had detected? Had my parents sensed it? My friends? My previous boyfriends? Was this why David had cheated on me in college? Why Michael had needed space 2 years before I met Marcus? I drove home on autopilot, thankful for the empty late evening streets. My apartment felt hollow when I walked in. I'd been spending so much time at Marcus's place that mine had started to feel like a storage unit for the parts of my life that didn't fit into his. I sank onto my couch in the dark, not bothering with lights. My phone buzzed. Marcus, can we please talk? I never meant to hurt you. I stared at the message, feeling nothing but a vast emptiness where pain should be. I turned off my phone without responding. That night, I didn't cry myself to sleep. I didn't sleep at all. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the word unlovable, writing itself in the shadows over and over again. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't face people, couldn't bear the thought of making small talk while carrying this new knowledge about myself. Instead, I did what any rational adult would do. I pulled out a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, poured myself a glass at 9 a.m., and started Googling how to know if you're unlovable. The internet, helpful as always, provided quizzes, psychology articles, and self-help guides. I took 3 quizzes before throwing my phone across the room. According to the internet, I was 1. Suffering from abandonment issues 2. Too needy 3. Not vulnerable enough 4. Too vulnerable 5. Possibly a narcissist 6. Probably codependent, so that cleared everything up. I was midway through my second glass of breakfast wine when my phone rang. My best friend Ava. I considered ignoring it, but knew she'd just keep calling. Hey, I answered, trying to sound normal. You're not at work, she said, skipping hello entirely. Marissa said you called in sick, but you never call in sick. What's wrong? Marcus is cheating on me with someone named Elise, and apparently I'm unlovable. How's your day going? Silence stretched for so long I thought we'd been disconnected. I'm coming over, Ava finally said. Don't move. Wasn't planning on it. 30 minutes later, Ava used her emergency key to let herself in, took one look at me in my pajamas with my wine glass, and said, "Oh, honey." In that tone people reserve for abandoned puppies and terminal diagnoses. I told her everything. The texts, his reaction, his words that kept replaying in my head. By the time I finished, Ava looked murderous. That absolute waste of skin. She fumed. I'm going to kill him. Slowly. With something rusty. Get in line, I said, but there was no heat in it. I just felt tired. Bone deep, soul tired. Ava grabbed the wine glass from my hand. This isn't helping. You need food, a shower, and then we're going to figure out how to make him regret ever learning the word unlovable. I don't think I have that kind of energy right now. Then I'll have it for both of us. She pulled me up from the couch. Shower. Now. You smell like despair and Chardonnay. I went through the motions. Showered, dressed in the clothes Ava laid out, ate the sandwich she made me. But I felt like I was watching someone else go through the motions of my life, someone wearing my skin but hollow inside. He's been calling and texting, Ava said, glancing at my phone. Want me to tell him to go to hell, or would you prefer to ignore him completely? Ignore, I said. I have nothing to say to him. Good choice. Clean break. She sat across from me at my tiny kitchen table. Now what do you need? Ice cream? Revenge fantasies? A weekend away? Name it. What did I need? The question felt impossible. What I needed was to rewind time, to unhear those words, to unlearn the truth about myself. What I needed was to know why. Why Marcus, why everyone found me fundamentally unlovable. I need to understand, I said finally. What makes someone unlovable? What's wrong with me that everyone eventually sees? Ava's face crumpled. Claire, nothing's wrong with you. Marcus is a sociopathic asshole who said the cruelest thing he could think of to justify his own shitty behavior. But what if he's right? The question came out small, vulnerable. What if there is something missing in me? There isn't. You have to say that. You're my friend. I'm your friend because you're one of the most lovable people I know, Ava said fiercely. You remember my grandfather's funeral last year? You took 3 days off work to help with arrangements, cooked for my entire family, and listened to my grandmother tell the same stories for hours because it comforted her. Who does that? Someone fundamentally lovable, that's who. I wanted to believe her, but Marcus's words had taken root. 4 years of him seeing me, knowing me intimately, and his assessment was unlovable. That couldn't be dismissed as simply a cruel lie. There had to be truth in it, some flaw I couldn't see in myself that was obvious to everyone else. The next few days passed in a blur. I returned to work, plastering on a smile that felt like a grimace. I avoided questions about Marcus. I ignored his increasingly desperate texts, 23 of them, each one read and reread in the dark of my bedroom, searching for some hint that he didn't really mean what he'd said. We need to talk. Please let me explain. I was just angry when I said those things to Elise. You're not being fair. I still care about you. Not once did he say I was wrong. You are lovable. Not once. On the 5th day after discovering the truth, I received a text from an unknown number. Claire, this is Elise. I know this is inappropriate, but I need to talk to you. Marcus isn't being honest with either of us. I stared at the text for a long time before responding. What do you want? To meet. Just once. I'll answer any questions you have. I should have said no. The healthy thing would have been to block her number and move on. But curiosity, or perhaps masochism, won out. Cornerstone Cafe. Tomorrow, 1 p.m. She replied immediately, I'll be there. Thank you. I didn't tell Ava. She would have talked me out of it, and rightly so. What good could come from meeting the woman Marcus left me for? The woman who was apparently lovable in all the ways I wasn't? I arrived early the next day, choosing a table in the back where we wouldn't be easily overheard. I ordered black coffee and watched the door, imagining what Elise might look like. Prettier than me, certainly. More magnetic. More lovable. When she walked in at precisely 1 p.m., I almost didn't realize it was her. She wasn't what I'd pictured. No supermodel looks, no obvious charisma. She was petite with short dark hair, dressed simply in jeans and a green sweater. She scanned the cafe, and I reluctantly raised my hand. Her smile was nervous as she approached. Claire? I'm Elise. Thank you for meeting me. I gestured to the chair across from me. Let's not pretend we're doing each other favors. Say what you came to say. She nodded, ordered a tea when the waiter came by, then took a deep breath. First, I need to apologize. I knew Marcus was in a relationship when we met. I told myself it was already over, that he was just finding the right time to end things with you. I was wrong to get involved before he did. Is that what you wanted to tell me? That you're sorry for helping him cheat? No. She fiddled with her napkin. I wanted to tell you that Marcus is a liar. To you, to me, to himself. I took a sip of my coffee, using the moment to steady myself. Go on. We met at a work conference 2 months ago. He pursued me aggressively, told me his relationship with you was essentially over, that you were more like roommates than partners. When I pressed him on why he hadn't ended things, he said you were emotionally unstable, and he was worried about how you'd react. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. And you believed him? At first, yes, she admitted. But things didn't add up. He'd make plans, then cancel last minute with vague excuses. He was evasive about his schedule. Then last week I saw a notification on his phone, a calendar reminder about your anniversary dinner. Our anniversary. I'd forgotten in the chaos of the past week. We would have been celebrating 5 years next month. I confronted him, Elise continued, asked him why he was planning an anniversary dinner if your relationship was essentially over. He got defensive, said I was pressuring him, that I didn't understand the complexities of the situation. So you pushed him to end things with me. She nodded. I told him I was done being the other woman. That's when he said those things about you being unlovable. I knew it was cruel, but I thought... She looked down. I thought maybe it was true, that there was something wrong with your relationship I couldn't see. And now? I kept my voice neutral, though my hands were shaking under the table. Now I know he says whatever is convenient in the moment. She pulled out her phone. 3 days ago, after you found out, he told me you were hysterical and making everything worse than it needed to be. He said he needed space from both of us to figure things out. She slid her phone across the table, showing me text messages from Marcus. I care about both of you in different ways. Claire and I have history. You and I have chemistry. I need time to decide what I really want. I laughed, and even to my own ears it sounded hollow. He's trying to keep his options open. Exactly. Elise took her phone back. Yesterday, I ran into his coworker Derek at the grocery store. He asked how Marcus was handling the breakup. When I looked confused, he said Marcus told everyone at work you'd ended things and he was devastated. He's lying to everyone, I said, the realization settling over me like a cold fog. Yes, and I think... She hesitated. I think maybe he's been lying to you for a long time. About a lot of things. She was right, of course. Looking back, I could see the pattern, Marcus subtly undermining my confidence, making comments about my appearance or social awkwardness, always framed as just trying to help. The way he'd discourage me from applying for promotions because you're already so stressed. How he'd sigh when I suggested trips or adventures, saying they weren't practical for someone like me. For years, he'd been constructing a narrative, one where I was fragile, limited, and yes, ultimately unlovable. And I'd believed it because I trusted him to see me clearly. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. What do you want? Nothing. I ended things with Marcus last night. She wrapped her hands around her teacup. I just thought, you deserve to know the truth. That his assessment of you says more about him than it does about you. We sat in silence for a moment. I should have felt vindicated, knowing Marcus was manipulating Elise too. Instead, I just felt tired. All those years wasted on someone who had never really seen me, never really wanted to. Thank you, I said eventually. For telling me? She nodded, then stood to leave. For what it's worth, Claire, in another life, I think we could have been friends. I watched her walk away, this woman who'd inadvertently helped unravel the fiction of my relationship. Not a villain after all, just another person caught in Marcus's web of convenient lies. That night, I finally blocked Marcus's number. I deleted our photos from my phone, unfriended him on social media, and emailed him a list of his belongings still at my apartment with instructions to arrange pickup when I wasn't home. It should have felt cathartic. Instead, it felt like amputating a diseased limb, necessary but traumatic. The word unlovable still echoed in my mind, softer now but persistent. The following weeks blurred together. I went to work, came home, occasionally saw friends when Ava forcibly extracted me from my apartment. I started therapy, something I should have done years ago, and began the painful process of examining why I'd stayed so long with someone who made me feel less than. My therapist, Dr. Chen, didn't sugarcoat things. It sounds like Marcus was subtly undermining your self-worth for years. That kind of emotional manipulation leaves scars. But why did I let him? I asked during our third session. Why didn't I see what he was doing? Because it was gradual. Because you trusted him. Because we're all vulnerable to believing negative things about ourselves when they come from someone we love. She leaned forward. The question now is, what are you going to do with this awareness? What indeed? I was 32, single again after what I'd thought was my forever relationship, carrying the emotional baggage of being called unlovable by the person who knew me best. Starting over seemed impossible. But day by day, I began to recognize how Marcus had shaped my self-perception. How I'd stopped wearing bright colors because he said they were trying too hard. How I'd given up painting because he called it a hobby, with a dismissive tone that made it clear hobbies were for people with nothing better to offer. How I'd learned to make myself smaller, quieter, less, to accommodate his version of who I should be. 2 months after the breakup, Ava convinced me to join her for a friend's gallery opening. I almost canceled 3 times, but she showed up at my door an hour before, outfit in hand, unwilling to take no for an answer. You need to remember there's a world outside your apartment and office, she insisted, holding up a blue dress I hadn't worn in years. And you're wearing this. It's your color. The gallery was crowded, full of people pretending to understand modern art while drinking free wine. I stuck close to Ava at first, using her as a buffer against social interaction. But somewhere between the second glass of wine and a particularly animated discussion about an installation that looked like garbage, but was apparently a commentary on consumerism, I found myself actually enjoying the evening. Claire Hammond? Is that you? I turned to find a vaguely familiar face smiling at me. It took a moment to place him. Nate Miller, someone I'd known in college. We'd had a few classes together, maybe worked on a project once. Nate, hi, I said, searching for something else to add. It's been, 10 years? At least. His smile was warm, genuine. You look exactly the same. Still taking on the world one color-coded spreadsheet at a time? I laughed, surprised he remembered my obsessive organization. Reformed mostly. Though my spice rack might tell a different story. Conversation flowed easily after that. Nate was an architect now, working on sustainable community projects. He was funny, engaged, asked questions, and actually listened to the answers. I found myself relaxing, enjoying the simple pleasure of talking to someone who seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. So what about you? He asked eventually. Still making those incredible charcoal drawings? I stared at him, genuinely surprised. You remember that? Are you kidding? That portrait series you did for Professor Harmon's class was incredible. You captured everyone's essence somehow. I felt a flush of pleasure, then the familiar pang. I haven't drawn anything in years, actually. That's criminal, he said, with such conviction I almost believed him. You had real talent. Later, as Ava and I walked to her car, she nudged me. So, Nate seemed nice. He was just being friendly. He asked for your number, Claire. As a friend. Former classmate. Whatever. Ava stopped walking. He didn't look at you like a whatever. He looked at you like you were the most interesting person in that whole gallery. I brushed it off, but Nate's words stayed with me. You had real talent. He'd remembered my art from a decade ago, something that had once been so important to me before Marcus had slowly convinced me it was trivial. That night, I dug through my closet until I found my old art supplies, buried in a box I hadn't opened in years. The charcoals were dried out, the sketch pad yellowed, but holding them felt like reconnecting with a part of myself I'd almost forgotten. I ordered new supplies the next day. Drawing again was like learning to walk after a long illness, awkward, frustrating, but ultimately exhilarating. My first attempts were terrible, stiff and hesitant, but each day I tried again, and slowly, the joy of creation returned. I didn't respond to Nate's text right away. It felt too soon, too risky. But after 2 weeks of him occasionally sending me articles about art exhibitions or sustainable architecture without pushing for a response, I finally texted back. Sorry for the radio silence. Going through some things. But I'd like to get coffee sometime. His response came quickly. No pressure. Coffee sounds great. Name the time and place. We met at a small cafe near my apartment. I was nervous, convinced the conversation would be awkward without the social lubricant of alcohol and a crowded gallery. But Nate was as easy to talk to as I remembered, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to measure every word. So what are these things you're going through, if you don't mind me asking? He said after we'd covered the safe topics of work and mutual acquaintances. I hesitated. The last thing I wanted was to dump my baggage on someone I barely knew. But something about his direct question, asked without presumption, made me answer honestly. Bad breakup. The kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. He nodded. Been there. Mine was 5 years ago. Jill. She left me for my roommate. Ouch. Yeah. Found out they'd been together for 6 months. In our apartment, while I was at work. That's awful. It was. For a long time after, I thought there was something fundamentally wrong with me. Like, what was so inadequate about me that the person I loved had to seek out someone else? His words hit so close to home that I found myself blinking back tears. That's exactly how I've been feeling. For what it's worth, he said carefully, that feeling isn't the truth. It's just pain talking. Does the feeling ever go away completely? I asked. Not completely, but it gets quieter. Other feelings get louder. After coffee turned into lunch and Nate walked me home, we stood awkwardly at my door. I had a good time, he said. Me too. Would it be too forward to ask if we could do this again? Maybe dinner next time? I felt a flutter of panic. Like, a date? Only if you want it to be. If not, just friends is great too. I enjoy talking with you. The simplicity of it, his honesty, his willingness to accept whatever boundaries I needed, made something loosen in my chest. Dinner would be nice, I said, but I should warn you, I'm not exactly in a great place for anything complicated. Noted. No complications. Just dinner and conversation, he smiled. Text me when you're free? I nodded, and he left without trying to kiss me, without pushing for more commitment than I'd offered. It was refreshingly respectful, so different from the emotional chess I'd grown accustomed to with Marcus. Over the next few months, Nate and I saw each other regularly. Dinner, movies, art exhibitions. He was patient, never pushing for more than I was ready to give, genuinely interested in my rediscovery of art and my slow process of rebuilding my sense of self. 6 months after my breakup with Marcus, I received a wedding invitation from my cousin Rebecca. The thought of attending solo, facing family questions about my relationship status, made my stomach churn. Without overthinking it, I texted Nate, "Want to be my date to a potentially awkward family wedding in June?" Absolutely. I look great in a suit and excel at charming older relatives. The wedding was in a small coastal town 3 hours away. Nate offered to drive, and the road trip became an unexpected highlight, singing along to 90s hits, stopping at roadside attractions, talking about everything and nothing. During the reception, as we slow danced to some cheesy love song, Nate held me carefully, like I was something precious. "Thank you for inviting me," he said softly. "I'm having a great time." "Even after my Aunt Martha interrogated you about your intentions," he laughed. "Especially after that. I like seeing you with your family. You're different, more relaxed, more you." "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, spinning me gently, "that when you forget to be guarded, you shine. It's beautiful to watch. Later that night, in the hotel room we'd awkwardly agreed to share, with Nate insisting he'd take the couch, I found myself standing in the bathroom staring at my reflection. I was wearing the blue dress Ava had insisted on for the gallery opening, my hair falling in soft waves, cheeks flushed from dancing and champagne. For the first time in almost a year, I didn't immediately catalog my flaws. I didn't hear Marcus's voice pointing out the imperfections. Instead, I saw what Nate seemed to see. Someone worthy of patience, of kindness, of appreciation. When I came out of the bathroom, Nate was arranging pillows on the couch. He looked up and smiled. "You know," I said, surprising myself with my boldness, "that couch looks really uncomfortable." His expression turned cautious. "It's fine. I've slept on worse." "Or," I said, heart hammering, "we could share the bed." "Just to sleep," I added quickly. "If you want." "Are you sure?" "No pressure, Claire. I'm perfectly fine out here." "I'm sure." That night, lying next to Nate in the dark, feeling the warmth of him nearby but not touching, I realized something important. I was starting to feel lovable again. Not because Nate loved me, it was far too soon for that, but because he treated me like someone worthy of love. And slowly, I was beginning to agree with him. The morning after the wedding, over room service breakfast, Nate asked the question that had been hovering between us for months. "Claire, I need to know. What are we doing here? Because I really like you, but I get the sense you're still holding back." I sighed, setting down my coffee. "I am. And you deserve to know why." I told him everything. About Marcus, about being called unlovable, about the slow erosion of my self-worth over 4 years. I told him about Elise, about therapy, about relearning who I was without Marcus's voice in my head. When I finished, Nate was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you for telling me," he finally said. "That explains a lot. And now you're reconsidering everything," I said, trying to smile but feeling my heart sink. "No," he said firmly. "Now I understand why you flinch sometimes when I compliment you, why you look surprised when I ask about your art, why you apologize for things that aren't your fault." He reached across the table for my hand. "It changes nothing about how I feel. It just helps me understand how to show you that your ex was completely, utterly wrong." Tears pricked my eyes. "I'm trying to believe that. I know. And I'm willing to wait while you figure it out." He squeezed my hand. "No rush, no pressure. Just don't push me away because you're afraid I'll eventually see whatever Marcus thought he saw." "And if I do have fundamental flaws?" I asked, voicing the fear that still haunted me. "If there is something broken in me, then we're perfectly matched," he said simply. "Because I'm pretty sure everyone's broken in some way. The trick is finding someone whose broken pieces fit with yours." On the drive home, as Nate sang off-key to the radio and the coastal scenery flashed by, I felt something unfamiliar. Hope. Not just for us, but for myself. The possibility that Marcus had been wrong, that I wasn't unlovable, just unloved by him. We took things slowly after that. Nate never pushed, but he was consistently there, sending texts when we were apart, making time for me despite his busy schedule, remembering small details about my preferences and fears. It wasn't grand gestures, but steady presence that began to heal the wounds Marcus had left. 9 months after the breakup, I was promoted at work, the same kind of promotion Marcus had discouraged me from seeking. At my celebration dinner with Nate, Ava, and a few close colleagues, I realized I hadn't thought about Marcus in weeks. That night, it was me who initiated our first real kiss, me who invited Nate to stay, me who chose to take a chance on being loved again. And when he looked at me with wonder, with desire, with genuine affection, I allowed myself to believe what he saw was real. A year into our relationship, Nate was offered a major project in Seattle, a 6-month commitment that would advance his career significantly. When he told me, his expression was mixed, excited about the opportunity but worried about what it meant for us. "It's an amazing opportunity," I said, meaning it. "You have to take it." "I don't have to do anything," he replied. "Not if it means risking what we have. 6 months isn't forever. We can make it work." He studied my face. "You're not afraid I'll meet someone else? That things will change?" The question hit a nerve. Of course I was afraid. The old insecurities whispered that anyone would be better than me, that Nate would realize in my absence how unlovable I truly was. But I recognized those thoughts for what they were now, echoes of Marcus, not truth. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "But I trust you, and I trust us. And I refuse to let fear make decisions for me anymore." Nate's smile was blinding. Have I told you lately that you're the strongest person I know? Flatterer. Truth teller? He corrected, pulling me close. The 6 months were harder than I'd expected. Long distance wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, of fear. But we made it work with daily video calls, surprise care packages, and 2 visits that reminded us why the separation was worth enduring. When Nate returned, something had shifted between us. The successful project had given him new confidence, and our survival of the separation had strengthened our trust in each other. We began talking about the future in concrete terms, moving in together, long-term plans, dreams we wanted to build together. It was during one of these conversations, curled up on my couch on a rainy Sunday afternoon, that Nate asked, "Have you ever thought about marriage?" My heart stuttered. "In general, or with me?" He clarified, his eyes serious. "Not right now, but someday." 2 years ago, the question would have filled me with desperate hope, the validation I'd been seeking from Marcus. Now it filled me with a different feeling, calm certainty. "Yes," I said simply. "I have." His smile was soft. "Good. Me too." 6 months later, he proposed, not with a grand gesture, but on an ordinary Tuesday morning as we got ready for work. Me with toothpaste on my chin, him with bedhead, both of us in our pajamas. "I want every morning to be like this," he said, pulling a ring box from his bathrobe pocket. "Messy and real and with you. Will you marry me, Claire?" I said yes through tears and laughter, feeling not like I'd won a prize but like I'd found a home. We set the date for 18 months later, time to plan the wedding we both wanted, intimate but joyful, a celebration of the life we were building together. I threw myself into the details, discovering I had strong opinions about everything from flowers to font choices on invitations. "You're turning into a bridezilla," Ava teased one day as we compared reception venues. "I'm not," I protested. "I just want it to be perfect." "The Claire from 2 years ago would have settled for good enough," she pointed out. "I like this version better." She was right. I'd changed, grown more confident, more willing to ask for what I wanted, more convinced I deserved good things. Therapy had helped, Nate had helped, but mostly I'd done the work myself of unlearning the lies Marcus had taught me to believe. It was during the guest list phase, 4 months before the wedding, that I had the dream. I was walking down the aisle, radiant in my dress, which in reality I hadn't chosen yet, and there in the back row sat Marcus, watching with undisguised envy as I prepared to marry someone who truly loved me. I woke up feeling strangely powerful. In the dream, Marcus had finally seen me clearly, seen what he had lost, what he had failed to appreciate. For the first time, I'd felt completely free of his assessment of me. The idea came to me gradually over the next few days. What if I made the dream real? What if I invited Marcus to the wedding? Not out of spite, exactly, but as a way to close that chapter completely, to show both of us how far I'd come, how wrong he'd been. I didn't mention it to Nate right away. It felt too complicated to explain, too potentially hurtful. But the idea persisted, growing from a fleeting thought into something that felt necessary for my own closure. Finally, 2 months before the wedding, I broached the subject. "I've been thinking about inviting Marcus to the wedding," I said one evening as we finished dinner. Nate's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Your ex? The one who said you were unlovable?" "Yes." He set his fork down. "Can I ask why?" I tried to articulate the complex tangle of feelings. "It's hard to explain. Part of me wants him to see that he was wrong about me, that I am lovable, that someone wonderful did choose me, that I've built this beautiful life he said I couldn't have." "That sounds a lot like wanting his validation," Nate said carefully. "Which I thought you didn't need anymore." His observation stung because it contained a kernel of truth. "It's not about validation," I insisted. "It's about closing the loop, showing myself as much as him that his power over me is gone. And you think inviting him to watch us get married is the way to do that?" Put like that, it did sound slightly unhinged. "Maybe not. I don't know. It was just an idea." Nate was quiet for a moment, thinking. "If you genuinely believe this would help you, I won't object. But I have to ask, are you sure this isn't giving him more importance than he deserves? Making our wedding day partly about him? I hadn't thought of it that way." "I don't want that," I said quickly. "The day is about us, not him." "Exactly." Nate reached for my hand. "So why invite a ghost to our celebration?" I nodded, letting the idea go. Nate was right. Marcus didn't deserve space in our special day, not even as an audience to my happiness. But that night, as Nate slept beside me, I found myself staring at the ceiling, the thought still nagging. Was I genuinely over Marcus if I still cared what he thought? Had I truly moved on if part of me still wanted to prove him wrong? The next day at lunch, I confided in Ava. I had this idea about inviting Marcus to the wedding, but Nate thinks it's giving him too much power. He's probably right. Ava, unlike Nate, didn't immediately dismiss the notion. Actually, I get it. You do? Sure. It's not about wanting Marcus back or needing his approval. It's about reclaiming the narrative. She stirred her iced tea thoughtfully. He told you that you were unlovable. What better proof that he was wrong than your actual wedding to someone who adores you? Exactly! I felt vindicated that someone understood, but Nate thinks it makes our wedding day about Marcus somehow. Men, Ava sighed. They don't always understand the complexity of closure. She leaned forward. Look, I'm not saying you should do it, but I understand why you want to. That night, I tried to explain again to Nate, using some of Ava's framing. It's about reclaiming the narrative, I said. About physically demonstrating to myself that I've moved beyond his judgment. Nate listened more openly this time. I want you to have closure, he said finally. I just don't want our wedding to become a revenge fantasy. It won't, I promised. The wedding is about us, our love, our future. If Marcus is there, he's just an afterthought. A footnote to a story that's no longer about him. Nate still looked uncertain, but he nodded. If it's important to you, then I support it. I just want you to be sure it's what you really want. Was it what I really wanted? I spent the next week turning the question over in my mind. Would seeing Marcus at my wedding bring closure, or would it reopen old wounds? Was I strong enough now to face him without being affected by his presence? I decided to sleep on it, to let my subconscious work through the tangle of emotions. But that night, as I drifted off, my phone chimed with a notification. A new Instagram post from a mutual friend had been tagged with Marcus's account. I hadn't looked at his social media since our breakup, a decision made for my own mental health, but now my finger hovered over his name. Before I could overthink it, I tapped, opening his profile. The most recent photo showed Marcus with his arm around a woman I didn't recognize. Not Elise, someone new. They were on a beach somewhere, looking tanned and happy. The caption read, "Finally found my perfect match. Blessed." Something cold and hard settled in my stomach. Perfect match. The implication was clear. His previous relationships, including ours, had been imperfect, inadequate. The people in them, me, unlovable. I scrolled further, finding more photos with this woman, each caption more effusive than the last. When you know you know, some people just fit. Everything before was practice for the real thing. Each word was a paper cut to my healing heart. Not because I wanted Marcus back. I didn't, not even slightly, but because his narrative erased our 4 years together as nothing but practice, dismissing the love I'd genuinely felt as inadequate. That's when I knew. I didn't just want Marcus at my wedding. I needed him there. Not for validation, not for revenge, but for justice. To correct the record. To show him and myself that his judgment had been wrong, that the unlovable woman he'd discarded had built a beautiful life without him. The next morning, I sat down with Nate and showed him Marcus's Instagram. This is why I want to invite him, I said. Not to make him jealous or to get him back, but because he's still telling himself and the world that I was somehow deficient, that his happiness now proves he was right to think I was unlovable. Nate scrolled through the posts, his expression darkening. These are cruel even if he doesn't name you. It's like he's rewriting history to make himself the hero. Exactly. And I know I shouldn't care. I know his opinion doesn't define me, but part of me still wants to set the record straight. Nate was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, I get it now. If having him there will help you fully close this chapter, then let's do it. But, he added with a slight smile, let's make sure our wedding is so obviously perfect that he feels like the footnote, not the other way around. With Nate's blessing, I crafted the invitation. Not a regular invitation. Those had gone out months ago to people we actually wanted at our celebration. This was different, special, designed specifically for Marcus. I chose the most elegant stationery, the most beautiful calligraphy. The invitation specified a VIP seat at the ceremony, a spot where Marcus would have a perfect view of our exchange of vows, our first kiss as husband and wife, our unfiltered joy. Inside, I included a handwritten note. Marcus, life has a way of proving what's true and what isn't. I thought you might want to witness proof of just how wrong you were about me. No response necessary. Your seat will be waiting. Claire, Director. Unapologetic. Clear. I didn't send it immediately. I placed it on my desk, looking at it each morning, asking myself if this was truly the closure I needed, or if I was giving Marcus more significance than he deserved. A week passed, then 2. The invitation sat unsent, both tempting and troubling me. Then, 3 weeks before the wedding, a text appeared on my phone from a number I didn't recognize. "Claire, it's Marcus. Got your number from Jake? Heard you're getting married. Can we talk? For closure?" I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a complex wave of emotions. Anger that he'd sought out my number. Irritation that he assumed I needed closure from him. But also, strangely, a sense of opportunity. I showed the text to Nate, who frowned. "Convenient timing. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to send the invitation," I decided. No text response, just the invitation. Let him make of that what he will. The next day, I mailed the carefully crafted envelope to Marcus's address, the same apartment where I'd discovered the truth about his feelings for me 2 years earlier. Then I blocked his new number, preventing any direct response. Let him sit with the invitation. Let him wonder. Let him decide whether to attend or not. Either way, I would be marrying the love of my life, proving definitively that I was anything but unlovable. As the wedding approached, I found myself thinking less and less about Marcus. There were final fittings to attend, seating charts to arrange, vows to perfect. My focus shifted entirely to Nate, to our future, to the celebration we'd planned so carefully. The night before our wedding, at the rehearsal dinner surrounded by our closest friends and family, Nate toasted me with words that made every painful step of the journey worthwhile. "To Claire," he said, raising his glass, "who taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone perfectly matched to you. Your strength amazes me every day. I'm the luckiest man alive that you chose me to walk through life with you." In that moment, with tears in my eyes and surrounded by genuine love, I realized something important. I didn't care if Marcus came to the wedding. His presence or absence didn't matter. I was whole either way, loved either way, complete either way. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. As I sat in the bridal suite, Ava arranging my hair while my mother fussed with my veil, I felt a profound sense of peace. Whatever happened today, whether Marcus showed up or not, this day was about Nate and me, about the future we were building together. "Are you nervous?" my mother asked, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from my dress. "Not even a little," I replied, surprised to find it was true. An hour before the ceremony, as guests began to arrive, Ava peeked out the window of the bridal suite. "Do you want to know if he's here?" she asked quietly, understanding without being told who he was. I considered the question carefully, then shook my head. "No, it doesn't matter anymore." And it didn't. Whether Marcus was sitting in that VIP seat or not, I knew the truth about myself now. I was lovable, not because Nate loved me, but because I had finally learned to love myself, to see my own worth clearly without someone else's distorted lens. As I prepared to walk down the aisle to the man who had helped me rediscover my value, I silently thanked Marcus for the painful gift he'd given me. In calling me unlovable, he had set me on the path to discovering just how capable of love and worthy of being loved I truly was. "Ready?" my father asked, offering his arm. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past fall away, leaving only the bright promise of the future. "More than ready," I said, and stepped forward into my new life. The music swelled as the double doors opened. I took my first step down the aisle, my father's arm steady beneath my hand. The venue was exactly as I'd imagined, bathed in soft golden light, white roses and greenery creating an ethereal tunnel toward the altar where Nate waited. And he was breathtaking. Standing tall in his tailored suit, looking at me with such open adoration that it made my breath catch. This man who had never once made me feel like I needed to be anything other than exactly who I was. As we walked, I allowed myself one quick scan of the guests, friends, family, colleagues, all smiling and misty-eyed. And there, in the back row, not in the VIP seat I'd designated but pressed against the wall like he was trying to make himself invisible, stood Marcus. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. I saw shock in his expression, then something harder to define. Regret, perhaps, or simply discomfort. I didn't linger on his face. Didn't need to. That brief glance told me everything I needed to know. He had come, and he was witnessing exactly what I'd wanted him to see. But what surprised me most was my own reaction. There was no surge of vindication, no rush of triumph. Instead, I felt a quiet sense of completion, like the final page of a book being turned. And then my attention returned entirely to Nate, to the journey we were beginning together, and Marcus faded into irrelevance. My father kissed my cheek at the altar, then placed my hand in Nate's, a gesture that somehow felt both ancient and perfectly modern. Nate's fingers wrapped around mine, warm and steady. "You're stunning," he whispered, audible only to me. "So are you," I whispered back, and we both smiled like we were sharing the world's best secret. The ceremony passed in a blur of emotion. We had written our own vows, and when it came time to speak them, I was surprised by my own steadiness. No nervous tremors, no voice cracks, just pure certainty as I promised myself to this man who had helped me rediscover myself. Nate's vows made me cry, especially when he said, "I promise to see you, truly see you, every day of our lives together, to celebrate your strength, to honor your dreams, and to remind you of your worth whenever you forget it." When we were pronounced husband and wife, when Nate's lips met mine in that first married kiss, the applause from our guests seemed to wash away every remaining doubt, every lingering ghost. We turned to face our friends and family as a married couple, and I didn't look for Marcus. I didn't need to. The reception was a whirlwind of laughter, dancing, toasts, and cake. I remember spinning across the dance floor in Nate's arms, feeling weightless and perfectly anchored at the same time. I remember Ava's maid of honor speech that made everyone alternatively cry and howl with laughter. I remember feeding Nate cake and the way he kissed a dot of frosting from the corner of my mouth afterward. What I don't remember is seeing Marcus again. At some point during the reception, Ava sidled up to me at the bar. "He left," she said quietly, "right after the ceremony." "Who?" I asked, genuinely confused for a moment. Ava raised an eyebrow. "Marcus." "Oh." I realized I hadn't thought of him once since walking down the aisle. "Did he say anything?" "Not to me. But I saw his face when you and Nate exchanged vows." She smiled a little fiercely. "He looked like a man who'd just realized he'd thrown away a diamond thinking it was glass." I considered this. "And how do I look? Like someone who couldn't care less about cubic zirconia." She clinked her champagne glass against mine. "You did it, Claire. You're free." She was right. Standing there in my wedding dress, surrounded by love and celebration, I felt the last tendrils of Marcus's unlovable judgment finally dissolve completely. It wasn't the invite or his attendance that had exorcised those ghosts. It was the realization that his opinion had become thoroughly, absolutely irrelevant to my story. Later that night, as Nate and I swayed together during the last dance, I told him about Marcus's brief appearance and even briefer departure. "Are you disappointed?" Nate asked. "That he didn't stay to see how happy you are?" I considered the question seriously. "No, I think I got what I needed the moment I saw him standing there. Proof that he knows he was wrong about me." I rested my head against Nate's shoulder. "But honestly, I'd already moved on before he even arrived." Nate's arms tightened around me. "Good, because this day was never about him. It was about us. About our beginning." "Our beginning," I repeated, loving the sound of it. "I like that better than an ending." We left for our honeymoon the next morning, 2 weeks in Italy, exploring ancient cities and coastal villages. Away from daily life, cocooned in post-wedding bliss, we grew even closer. We made love in sun-dappled hotel rooms, argued over the best gelato flavors, got lost in winding streets, and found ourselves in quiet moments watching sunsets over the Mediterranean. One evening in Positano, as we shared a bottle of wine on our hotel balcony overlooking the sea, Nate asked me, "Do you ever think about where you'd be if Marcus hadn't said what he did? If you'd never seen those texts?" The question startled me. We rarely spoke of Marcus anymore. He felt like a character from a book I'd read long ago. "Sometimes," I admitted, "I might still be with him, still believing I was lucky that someone was willing to tolerate me, still making myself smaller to fit his idea of who I should be. So in a weird way, it was a gift I finished for him. A painful, terrible gift that I'd never wish on anyone, but one that ultimately led me here." I reached for his hand. "To you. To this. To myself." When we returned home, real life awaited. Merging households, combining finances, navigating the everyday realities of marriage. We'd decided to sell both our places and buy something new together, a fresh start in a home that belonged equally to both of us. House hunting became our weekend activity, and we quickly discovered we had different priorities. Nate wanted architectural character and good bones. I cared more about natural light and flow. We bickered and compromised, learning the dance of married decision-making. "This place feels right," Nate said one Sunday, as we stood in the living room of a 1930s bungalow with updated interiors. It had the character he loved and the light-filled spaces I craved. "It feels like us." I agreed, already envisioning our furniture in the space, art on the walls, maybe someday children running down the hallway. We made an offer that afternoon and celebrated with takeout and champagne when it was accepted. As we clinked glasses in our soon-to-be former apartment, surrounded by moving boxes, I felt a surge of gratitude for this ordinary moment of shared joy. "What are you thinking about?" Nate asked, noticing my expression. "Just that I'm happy. Not in a big dramatic way, but in a quiet, certain way I'm not sure I've ever felt before." He smiled. "That's the best kind. The kind that lasts." Moving into our new home, painting walls and arranging furniture, we established our routines and rituals. Sunday morning coffee in the garden, Friday night movies on the couch, small arguments about dishwasher loading techniques and thermostat settings that always resolved with humor and compromise. It wasn't perfect, no relationship is, but it was honest. When we disagreed, we talked it through. When one of us was struggling, the other provided support without judgment. We were building something sturdy, day by ordinary day. 6 months after our wedding, I received an unexpected email from Elise, Marcus's once affair-turned-girlfriend whom I hadn't spoken to since our coffee shop meeting 2 years earlier. "Claire, I hope this isn't unwelcome, but I wanted to say congratulations on your marriage. A mutual friend mentioned it, and I'm genuinely happy for you. I thought you might want to know that Marcus and I are no longer in contact. I eventually realized he was telling me the same things about others that he once said about you. History repeats, I suppose. This isn't meant to stir up old pain. I just wanted you to know that his judgment was always about him, never about you. Wishing you every happiness, Elise." I showed the email to Nate that evening. "Are you okay?" he asked after reading it. "That's the strange thing," I said. "I am. Completely okay. I don't feel anything about Marcus anymore. Not anger, not hurt, not even satisfaction that he apparently hasn't changed. Just nothing." Nate smiled. "That's how you know you've truly moved on. When they become a neutral part of your past instead of an emotional trigger." I nodded, thinking about how far I'd come from that devastating night when I'd discovered what Marcus really thought of me. The journey from unlovable to this peaceful self-acceptance had been long and often painful, but sitting here in the home I shared with my husband, I wouldn't change any of it. I replied to Elise with a simple message, "Thank you for your kindness. I wish you well too." Then I closed that door completely. Life continued its forward motion. I received a significant promotion at work. Nate's sustainable design practice began gaining national recognition. We traveled, entertained friends in our home, nurtured our marriage with intentional care. On our first anniversary, we returned to the coastal hotel where we'd stayed for my cousin's wedding, the place where our relationship had first deepened beyond casual dating. We walked the same beach, ate at the same restaurants, remade memories with the added richness of all we'd experienced since. "Any regrets?" Nate asked as we watched the sunset from the same balcony where we'd talked about marriage for the first time. "About this year, about us?" "Not one," I said honestly. "You?" "Only that we didn't meet sooner." He kissed me softly. "Though maybe we met exactly when we needed to." I thought about timing, about how the universe sometimes gives you exactly what you need precisely when you're ready to receive it. How Nate wouldn't have been right for the version of me that had believed in my own unlovability. How I might not have appreciated him properly without first learning to value myself. "I think you're right," I said. Perfect timing. During our second year of marriage, the question of children began to surface. Not with pressure, but as a natural evolution of our conversations about the future. "I always assumed I'd have kids someday," Nate said one evening as we watched our friend's toddler during a dinner party. "But I want to make sure we're on the same page." The old Claire might have immediately agreed, afraid to disappoint. The new Claire took her time, examining her own desires separate from any expectations. "I think I want that too," I said finally. "But not right away. There are still things I want to do first. Finish my portfolio, maybe have a small gallery showing. I'm just finding my voice again. I don't want to lose it." "We don't have to rush," Nate assured me. "Whenever we're both ready. If we're ever both ready. And if we decide it's not for us, that's okay too." That freedom to choose, to set my own timeline without fear of rejection, it was another gift of our relationship, another reminder of how far I'd come from the woman who'd built her life around someone else's expectations. It was around this time that my art began attracting attention beyond our circle of friends. What had started as personal therapy, reclaiming the creative passion Marcus had dismissed, evolved into something more. My charcoal portraits, particularly a series capturing people in moments of private emotion, resonated with viewers in unexpected ways. A friend who owned a small gallery offered me wall space during an emerging artists' showcase. I nearly declined, old insecurities flaring, but Nate and Ava tag-teamed their encouragement until I agreed. The night of the showcase, I stood nervously by my displayed work, watching strangers examine my art with serious expressions. Some merely glanced and moved on. Others lingered, leaning in close to study details. "These are remarkable," an older woman told me, gesturing to a portrait of an elderly man with laugh lines and sorrowful eyes. "You've captured something most people hide." "Thank you," I said, flushing with pleasure. "I'm interested in the duality of emotions, how we can carry joy and pain simultaneously." She nodded approvingly. "You have a gift for emotional truth." By the end of the evening, I'd sold 3 pieces and received a commission for another. But more important than the sales was the validation that my art, the expression of my innermost self, could connect with others in meaningful ways. "I'm so proud of you," Nate said on the drive home, his hand warm on my knee. "Not just for the success, but for taking the risk, for putting yourself out there." "I couldn't have done it without you believing in me," I said. "No," he corrected gently. "You did this because you finally believed in yourself." "I just had the good sense to agree with you." He was right. The journey from seeing myself through Marcus's critical eyes to recognizing my own worth had been primarily internal work. Nate had been my supporter, but I had been my own rescuer. This realization, that I had saved myself, settled into my consciousness with quiet certainty. I wasn't lovable because Nate loved me. Nate loved me because I was lovable, had always been lovable, would always be lovable regardless of anyone else's ability to see it. That night, lying in bed beside my sleeping husband, I felt a sense of completion. Not an ending, but a circle closing, a narrative finding its proper resolution. Marcus had called me unlovable, and for too long I had believed him. Now I knew better. Now I knew the truth. 3 years into our marriage, at age 36, I discovered I was pregnant. It wasn't planned, but wasn't unwelcome either. We'd stopped being careful several months earlier, adopting a "if it happens, it happens" approach. Still, seeing the positive test felt momentous. I sat on the bathroom floor for a long time, hand resting on my still flat stomach, imagining the tiny life beginning inside me. A child who would know from their first breath that they were loved, that they were worthy, that they were enough exactly as they were. I told Nate that evening with shaking hands and tear-filled eyes. His response, pure joy, then tender concern for how I was feeling, confirmed yet again that I had chosen well, that we had chosen each other well. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, his hand joining mine over my stomach. "I think so," I said. "I'm a little terrified, but in a good way." "Me too." His smile was vulnerable, honest. "We'll figure it out together." Pregnancy changed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Beyond the physical transformations, I found myself reflecting deeply on my own childhood, on the subtle messages I'd received about my worth that had made me vulnerable to someone like Marcus. I vowed that my child would grow up with an unshakable sense of their intrinsic value. As my body expanded, so did my art. I began a new series, abstract representations of growth and transformation. Less literal than my portraits, these pieces expressed something elemental about becoming, about the physical and emotional metamorphosis of creating new life. "These are different," Ava observed, studying the canvases in my home studio. "Powerful. I feel different," I admitted, "like I'm connecting with something ancient and universal." My gallery showing expanded to a solo exhibition scheduled for 2 months after my due date. Life was unfolding with a richness I couldn't have imagined during those dark days when unlovable had been the word that defined me. As my 7th month of pregnancy began, I received an unexpected message on social media from someone I hadn't heard from in years, Marcus's sister, Lily. "Claire, I hope this isn't intrusive, but I wanted to check if you're the same Claire Hammond who has the upcoming exhibition at the West Side Gallery. The style reminded me of your old drawings. If so, congratulations, both on the show and the baby. I spotted your pregnancy announcement. You look radiantly happy. I hadn't spoken to Lily since the breakup." She'd sent one kind message afterward, saying she was sorry things hadn't worked out, but we hadn't maintained contact. I'd always liked her. She was nothing like her brother, but the connection had been too painful to preserve. After consideration, I replied, "Yes, that's me. Thank you for the kind words. Life has been good. I hope you're well too." Her response came quickly, "I'm glad to hear that. I've actually moved back to the area and would love to attend your exhibition if that wouldn't be uncomfortable for you." I discussed it with Nate that evening. Would it be weird if I invited her? She was always kind to me, and it wasn't her fault her brother is who he is. "I think it's entirely your call," he said. "If you'd like to reconnect with her, I support that." I sent Lily an invitation to the exhibition's opening night and thought little more about it until a week later when she replied with another message. "Claire, I should probably mention, Marcus is in town that weekend for our cousin's wedding. He doesn't know I've contacted you, and I would never bring him to your event, but I wanted to be transparent about the timing in case that changes your feelings about my attendance." I read the message twice, surprised by my lack of reaction. 3 years ago, the mere thought of potentially being in the same city as Marcus would have sent me into an anxiety spiral. Now it registered as a simple logistical detail, no more emotionally charged than a weather forecast. "He'll be in town when Lily visits my exhibition," I told Nate that evening. "Does that bother you?" Nate considered the question. "Does it bother you?" "Oddly, no. It feels completely irrelevant." "Then it doesn't bother me either." He placed his hand on my rounded belly, where our daughter had just delivered a particularly enthusiastic kick. "We've built something real here. Nothing and no one from the past can touch it." I rested my hand over his, feeling our baby move beneath our palms. "You're right. This is what matters now." I replied to Lily, "Thanks for letting me know. I'd still love to have you at the exhibition. The past is the past." Our daughter, Eliza Grace, arrived 2 weeks early on a stormy April morning. The labor was long and difficult, but the moment they placed her on my chest, this tiny, perfect person with Nate's nose and my chin, everything else faded away. Here was love in its purest form, undemanding and absolute. "She's beautiful," Nate whispered, his finger caught in Eliza's surprisingly strong grip. "Just like her mother." The first weeks of parenthood were a blur of exhaustion and wonder. Nate took a month off work to help during the initial adjustment, proving himself to be the partner I'd always known he would be, present, supportive, willing to learn alongside me as we figured out this new tiny human. Despite the sleepless nights and the overwhelming responsibility, I felt a deep sense of rightness. This was where I was meant to be, who I was meant to become. Mother, wife, artist, woman, all parts of me integrated into a whole that felt authentic and true. My exhibition was postponed by 6 weeks to accommodate Eliza's early arrival. When the new date approached, I felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension, not about the show itself, but about leaving Eliza for the evening, about returning to the public-facing part of myself after weeks in the intimate cocoon of new motherhood. "We'll be fine," Nate assured me as I fretted over pumped milk amounts and emergency contact lists. "It's just a few hours. And if we need you, we're 10 minutes away." "I know." I kissed Eliza's downy head, inhaling her sweet scent. "I'm being ridiculous." "You're being a mother," he corrected gently. "But you're also an artist with an important show tonight. Both parts of you matter." The gallery was transformed by my work, 30 pieces chronicling my journey through loss, healing, love, and creation. The earliest pieces, dark with grief and uncertainty, gave way to progressively more hopeful images, culminating in the vibrant abstracts from my pregnancy. "It's like walking through your soul," Ava said, linking her arm through mine as we toured the space before doors opened. "I've watched you live this journey, but seeing it all together like this, it's powerful, Claire." People began arriving, friends, colleagues, local art enthusiasts. I moved through the crowd, discussing my process, accepting congratulations, occasionally checking my phone for updates from Nate, all variations of, "We're fine, stop worrying." Midway through the evening, I spotted Lily near a series of portraits. Our eyes met, and after a moment's hesitation, she approached. "Claire, these are extraordinary," she said, gesturing to the artwork surrounding us. "You've always been talented, but this is another level entirely. Thank you." I smiled, finding it easier than expected to separate her from her brother. "I'm glad you could make it." "Me too." She glanced around. "Your husband and baby couldn't come?" "Eliza's a bit young for gallery openings." I laughed. "Nate's on daddy duty tonight." Lily nodded. "Motherhood suits you." "You look radiant. Something in her expression made me curious. "How is your brother?" I found myself asking, surprised by my own question. Lily hesitated, clearly weighing her response. "He's Marcus." Still convinced he's always right? Still blaming his unhappiness on everyone else? She met my eyes directly. "He saw your wedding announcement in the alumni newsletter. It affected him more than he wanted to admit. I invited him," I said, the admission feeling strangely liberating. "To the wedding. I wanted him to see that he was wrong about me." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "That explains it. He wouldn't talk about why he went, just came back from your wedding and disappeared for 3 days. When he resurfaced, he'd broken up with whatever girlfriend he had at the time and seemed, I don't know, shaken." I absorbed this information with surprising detachment. "I'm sorry if that caused problems for your family." "Don't be." She smiled wryly. "If anything, it was the most honest reaction I've seen from him in years. He actually admitted he'd made a mistake with you. That's practically unprecedented." "It doesn't matter anymore," I said, and meant it completely. "But thank you for telling me." We chatted a bit longer about her life, a new job, a recent engagement, before she moved on to view the rest of the exhibition. As I watched her go, I realized that this interaction, like seeing Marcus at my wedding, had served as a final confirmation. I was truly, completely free from the past. The exhibition was deemed a success by all measures: strong sales, positive reviews, an invitation to show at a larger gallery later in the year. But as I returned home to Nate and Eliza, I knew that my greatest achievement had nothing to do with public recognition. "How was it?" Nate asked, Eliza sleeping peacefully against his chest. "Wonderful." I kicked off my heels and sat beside them on the couch. "But this is better." As I settled into the rhythm of balancing motherhood, marriage, and my art career, I sometimes reflected on the strange, winding path that had led me here. How the most painful moment of my life, discovering I was unlovable, had ultimately catalyzed the most authentic version of myself. 6 months after my exhibition, I received a plain manila envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping about my show and a handwritten note on a small white card. I was wrong. 3 words. No apology, no elaborate explanation, just the simple acknowledgement I'd once thought I needed to heal. I showed it to Nate that evening as we sat in our garden, watching the sunset while Eliza slept inside, monitored by the baby camera beside us. "Are you going to respond?" he asked after reading it. I considered the question, turning it over carefully in my mind. There had been a time when such an admission from Marcus would have felt like vindication, like a victory in a war I'd been fighting for years. Now it felt merely like a footnote, an unnecessary postscript to a story I'd already completed. "No," I said finally. "There's nothing left to say." I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. Later, I would place it in a memory box alongside other artifacts of my life, not because it still held power, but because it marked a chapter in my journey, a darkness that had ultimately led to light. As Eliza grew from infant to toddler to preschooler, as Nate and I navigated the everyday challenges of marriage and parenthood, as my art evolved and my sense of self solidified, I occasionally thought about the concept of being unlovable. How I had once accepted someone else's assessment of my worth, how I had allowed a single word to define me. My daughter was 3 when she first asked about the large framed sketch hanging in our hallway, a self-portrait I'd drawn during those early days after discovering Marcus's texts. In it, my eyes were hollow, my expression raw with pain. "Why are you sad in that picture, Mama?" Eliza asked, her small finger pointing up at the drawing. I knelt beside her, considering how to explain complex adult emotions to a child. "I drew that a long time ago when I believed something untrue about myself." "What did you believe?" "I believed I wasn't worthy of love," I said simply, her little face scrunched in confusion. "But everyone is worthy of love." I hugged her then, this wise child who instinctively understood what had taken me years to learn. "Yes, sweetheart, everyone is worthy of love, exactly as they are." Later that night, as Nate and I prepared for bed, I told him about Eliza's response to my self-portrait. "She's right, you know," he said, pulling me close. "Everyone is worthy of love. Some people just have trouble seeing it." I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I'm glad you saw it in me, even when I couldn't see it in myself." "I saw you," he said simply. "All of you. The good, the bad, the messy, the beautiful. And I loved what I saw." That night, as I drifted toward sleep in the arms of the man who had helped me find my way back to myself, I felt a profound sense of peace. The word unlovable no longer had any power over me. It had been replaced by other words: wife, mother, artist, friend, all facets of a woman who had learned the most important truth. We are all lovable, not because someone else declares it so, but because it is our birthright, our inherent nature, our fundamental truth. And no one can take that away unless we let them. I haven't seen Marcus since my wedding day. I hear snippets about his life occasionally through mutual acquaintances: another broken relationship, a career change, a move to another city. I wish him well, without attachment or resentment. His role in my story is long complete. Sometimes when I'm working in my studio with sunlight streaming through the windows, or watching Nate and Eliza build elaborate block towers on the living room floor, or sharing wine and laughter with friends on our back patio, I'm struck by how completely happiness has replaced hurt. Not a perfect happiness. Life doesn't work that way. We have our challenges, our arguments, our hard days, but a real happiness, built on truth and mutual respect and the freedom to be fully ourselves. 5 years after Marcus called me unlovable, I finally understand that he was wrong not just about me, but about love itself. Love isn't something you earn through perfection or lose through flaws. It's not conditional on meeting someone else's expectations or fitting into their predefined box. True love, the kind I share with Nate, with Eliza, with my friends, and finally with myself, is acceptance of the whole person. It's creating space for growth without demanding change. It's seeing clearly and choosing daily to embrace what you see. I am lovable. I have always been lovable. And in the end, the only person who needed to believe that was me.